So we're going to make heddles for this shacked Inkle loom, and the supplies that you will need are a pair of scissors, some white glue, a thread to use for measuring, non-stretchy. You don't want it to be wool, you want it to be cotton. And then you want a material for your heddles. I usually use crochet cotton, and this is the regular old ordinary crochet cotton that you get at your local yarn store or big box store. But my preference is a little bit higher quality cotton. I use DMC Sibelia, and it comes in at least size number 10, 20, and 30. For general purpose heddles, a number 10 is what you want. If you get into weaving finer threads, then you'll want perhaps the 30. Another thing that you want is a light color, a color that won't transfer from your heddles to your project. So a natural color or white, this is a light yellow, an ecru, something light is what you want. So a number 10 crochet cotton. And I have the loom set up here with 2 threads on it. And when you're weaving with an Inkle, you have 1 thread that goes up and 1 thread that is stationary. The stationary thread is this top thread, goes over the top peg between the front peg and the back peg. The thread that moves, yellow in my setup here, goes straight from the front peg to the back peg. And we want to get them so that they're in the same plane. And I have a heddle already made for this loom, so you can see what we're trying to accomplish here. If you're lucky, your loom came with instructions and it shows you how to do this, how to make your heddles, or at least what length. This is what we want it to look like. But if we don't know that dimension, that's what I'm going to show you is how to do it, because there are a lot of handmade Inkles out there, and the important part is that we get all the threads lined up in the same plane. So this is what our goal is. I'm going to take this off and show you how to measure to find that distance. This is the heddle peg. The heddle always goes around it. We use a double heddle. The heddle that I just showed you folded over the top of the pink thread, and both loops on that went around the heddle peg. We're going to find the length of 1 time around and then double it when we get off the loom. So that you can see, I'm going to hold this side at the yellow thread because we want the pink to come down to it. So at that point, our sheds are lined up, and I want to mark with my fingers that length. So this is the length of half of that thread. And if we double it, we get the full length of the thread. And then we're going to add some extra, but not quite yet. I'm going to tie a knot at the point of the length of that thread, just an overhand knot. You could also use a black Sharpie to mark it. Okay, so we've got our knot tied in the string that shows us how long we want our heddle. And on this loom, we're going to play until we get that knot to meet the other end, and it's not meeting. Let's try these. Oh, it's just almost there, but not quite. So if we take this one out, there we go. If I tie my Heddle strings around these 3 pegs, I will have the perfect length for my Heddles. So let's do that. What I like to do is, now I know that they're that long, and I know that I need to have room to tie knots. I'm going to cut it a bit longer, and crochet cotton is cheap. I err on the side of long enough for my clumsy fingers to tie. So now I know how much string I need to make a Heddle, and I will make multiple pieces of string the same length. Now, if you have a whole lot of Heddles to make, you may want to use a jig. And a jig will be used to wrap your string around, as opposed to just measuring a few like I've done here. So here's our 3 pegs we're going to go around. I'm going to tie at the top peg the first half of a square knot, the second half of a square knot, and then I repeat the first half of the square knot again. And I'm going to do that 2 more times and show you the next step. Now, when I was in 8th grade and I taught knot tying to 4-Hers, I learned that a mnemonic for a square knot, and that is right over left and left over right makes a knot neat and tidy and tight. So you remember that you have to alternate the tails as you make the knot, and if you're not comfortable with knowing exactly what a square knot is, you might want to look it up, because you don't want a granny knot that will slip. Having to fix a Heddle in the middle of your weaving isn't that much fun. So all my knots are on top, and I squish them all together, pull up my tails, and I'm going to trim them so they're about 1/4 inch long. And now I'm going to slide those knots down so they're nowhere near wood, because now I'm going to use white glue. And I'm going to put just a dollop of glue on those knots. There we go. That's just 1 drop for all 3 of those. And now I'm going to mush it with my fingers into the knot, separate them out, and let them dry.